The table was set for two, candle lit, wine untouched. The Mafia boss checked his watch for the third time. His blind date was 40 minutes late. People didn't stand him up. They didn't forget him, and they definitely didn't make him wait. He was just about to stand and leave when something small collided with his leg. He looked down. A little girl, barefoot, hair tangled, her face streaked with dirt and tears. She grabbed his coat with shaking hands and looked up at him. "They beat my mama!" she cried. "She's dying, please." The restaurant went silent. The boss crouched slowly, scanning the room. No adults chasing her. No screams. Just a child who'd run until her lungs burned out. "Who did this?" he asked calmly. The girl pointed toward the dark street outside. "They said if she screamed again, they'd come for me too." In that moment, the Mafia boss understood something terrifying. His blind date hadn't stood him up. She had never been coming, and whoever hurt her had just made the worst mistake of their lives. Stay with me until the end, because what he discovers when he follows that little girl turns a simple blind date into a night the entire city will never forget. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. Vincent Torino had never believed in coincidences. 37 years of life had taught him that everything happened for a reason. Every handshake had purpose. Every conversation carried weight. Every bullet found its intended target. But sitting in Romano's that Tuesday evening, he almost let himself believe in chance. Just once. His sister Maria had set up this date, insisting that a man in his position needed someone who understood the weight of silence. Someone who could love him without asking questions about the blood on his shirts or the late-night phone calls that ended with zip codes and cemetery names. "She's perfect for you, Vinny," Maria had promised. "Smart enough to keep up with you, beautiful enough to make you forget the rest of the world exists, and strong enough to handle what comes with your last name." The reservation was for 8 o'clock. Vincent had arrived at 7:45, not because he was eager, but because punctuality was a form of respect. And in his world, disrespect was a luxury that got people buried in concrete. The restaurant buzzed with its usual Tuesday night energy. Couples sharing intimate conversations over pasta. Business associates closing deals over expensive wine. Tourists taking photos of their first authentic Italian meal. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that one of the most dangerous men in the city sat 3 tables away from them, straightening his tie and wondering if love was something he was still capable of feeling. By 8:15, he'd ordered a glass of Chianti. By 8:30, he'd finished it and ordered another. The waiter, a nervous young man with trembling hands, kept refilling his breadbasket without being asked. Word traveled fast in this neighborhood about who Vincent Torino was, and smart people knew to keep him comfortable when he was waiting. But as the minutes ticked by, something cold settled in Vincent's chest. Not anger exactly, disappointment maybe, or perhaps the familiar weight of realizing that even the simple things, the human things, weren't meant for men like him. He'd been checking his phone every few minutes. No missed calls, no text messages, no explanations, just the digital silence that screamed louder than any insult ever could. When the little girl crashed into his leg, Vincent's first instinct was pure muscle memory. His hand moved toward the gun beneath his jacket. His eyes swept the room for threats. His body tensed for violence. But then he looked down and saw something that stopped him cold. Terror. Raw, desperate, innocent terror in the eyes of a child who couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Her dress was torn at the shoulder. Dirt smudged her cheek like war paint. Her small feet were bare and bleeding from running on concrete, but it was her eyes that hit him hardest. They held the kind of fear that Vincent had seen in grown men right before they begged for their lives. "They beat my mama," she repeated, her voice breaking on each word. "She's dying, please." The entire restaurant had gone silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Even the kitchen seemed to hold its breath. as every person in the room processed what they'd just heard. Vincent crouched down slowly, bringing himself to the little girl's eye level. His voice, when he spoke, was gentle in a way that would have shocked anyone who knew his reputation. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Sophie," she whispered. "Sophie, I need you to tell me exactly what happened. Can you do that for me?" She nodded quickly, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. Mama was getting ready for her date. She was so happy. She put on her pretty blue dress and did her hair all fancy. She said she was going to meet someone very important. Vincent's blood turned to ice water in his veins. Blue dress. Important date. The description his sister had given him flashed through his mind like a neon sign. Elena Morrison, 5'6", dark hair, would be wearing blue. Where is your mama now?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. "At home. They came to the door and said they needed to talk to her. But when she opened it, they pushed inside and started yelling. One of them had a big stick. Another one had something shiny in his hand." Sophie's breathing became rapid and shallow as the memory overtook her. "Mama told me to hide in my closet. She said no matter what I heard, I shouldn't come out. But they were hurting her so bad. She was screaming, and then she stopped screaming, and that was worse." Vincent felt something dark and familiar rising in his chest. It was the same feeling he got right before he made someone disappear, the same cold rage that had built his empire and destroyed his enemies. But this time, it was personal in a way that terrified him. "How did you get out?" "The window in my room. I climbed down the tree like Mama taught me. She said if bad men ever came to our house, I should run to the restaurant and find someone to help." Vincent stood slowly, his mind already calculating distances, time frames, possibilities. Elena Morrison had been getting ready for their date when someone had broken into her home, someone who knew where she lived, someone who knew she'd be alone, someone who'd planned this. The little girl grabbed his hand with both of hers. "Please, you have to help her. The man with the shiny thing said if she made any more noise, they'd come find me next." Vincent looked down at Sophie's tear-streaked face and made a decision that would change everything. Not just for him, not just for Elena, but for every person who'd thought they could touch what was his and walk away breathing. He pulled out his phone and speed-dialed a number. It rang once before a gravelly voice answered. "Tony, I need you to listen carefully. I'm about to give you an address. I want you to take Marco and Danny and meet me there in 10 minutes. Bring the medical kit. And Tony," Vincent's voice dropped to a whisper that carried more menace than a scream, "bring everything else too." He hung up the phone and looked around the restaurant. Every pair of eyes was still fixed on him and the little girl. The weight of their stares meant nothing to him now. What mattered was the clock ticking in his head and the growing certainty that Elena Morrison was running out of time. Vincent knelt back down to Sophie's level. "I need you to stay right here with Maria," he said, gesturing to the restaurant owner's wife who had appeared from behind the counter. "She's going to take care of you while I go help your mama." Sophie's grip on his hand tightened. "But what if you don't come back? What if the bad men get you too?" Something shifted in Vincent's expression. For just a moment, the hardened crime boss disappeared, replaced by something gentler, something that remembered what it felt like to be small and afraid. "Sophie, look at me. I promise you, nothing is going to happen to your mama, and nothing is going to happen to you. Do you understand?" She nodded, though tears continued streaming down her cheeks. "Are you a policeman?" Vincent almost smiled at that. "No, sweetheart. I'm something else entirely." Maria, the restaurant owner's wife, approached cautiously. She was a grandmother of 6 with gentle hands and a fierce, protective instinct. "Come here, little one," she said softly, extending her arms to Sophie. "We'll get you cleaned up and find you something to eat." As Sophie reluctantly let go of Vincent's hand, he stood and surveyed the restaurant one final time. The other diners were pretending to return to their meals, but he could feel their nervous energy crackling through the air. They sensed that something significant was about to happen, something that would ripple through the neighborhood for weeks to come. Vincent walked toward the exit, his phone buzzing with incoming calls. His crew was mobilizing. Word was spreading through the network. By now, every soldier in his organization knew that someone had made a critical error in judgment. The night air hit his face as he stepped onto the sidewalk. Romano's sat on the corner of 5th and Meridian, right in the heart of Little Italy. It was Vincent's territory, his kingdom. Every business owner paid him respect. Every resident knew his name. And now, someone had violated that sacred space by hurting an innocent woman who was supposed to be under his protection. 3 black SUVs rounded the corner in perfect formation. The lead vehicle pulled up to the curb, and Tony Ricci stepped out. He was Vincent's lieutenant, a man whose loyalty had been tested in blood more times than either of them could count. Behind him came Marco and Danny, both carrying duffel bags that clinked softly as they moved. "Boss," Tony said, his voice all business. "What's the situation?" Vincent handed him a piece of paper with Elena's address scrawled across it. "A home invasion. Woman named Elena Morrison. She was supposed to be my date tonight. Instead, she's lying bleeding in her apartment while her 7-year-old daughter runs barefoot through the streets looking for help." Tony's jaw tightened. In their world, there were rules. Unwritten codes that separated them from common criminals. You didn't hurt women, you didn't terrorize children, and you definitely didn't interfere with Vincent Torino's personal life. "How many?" Marco asked, checking his weapon. "Unknown, but Sophie mentioned at least 2, maybe 3. One had a bat. Another had a blade of some kind." Danny whistled low. "They came prepared for violence. They have no idea what violence actually looks like," Vincent replied coldly. "But they're about to learn." The convoy moved through the streets with practiced efficiency. Vincent sat in the passenger seat of the lead vehicle, his mind racing through possibilities. Who knew about his date tonight? Who had access to Elena's address? Who would be stupid enough to target someone connected to him? The answers would come soon enough. They always did when Vincent applied the right kind of pressure. Elena Morrison lived in a converted brownstone on Maple Street, about 12 blocks from the restaurant. It was a quiet residential area, the kind of place where neighbors knew each other's names and children played on the sidewalks until their parents called them in for dinner. As they approached the building, Vincent could see that something was very wrong. The front door stood slightly ajar. Light spilled from the second-floor windows, but the curtains were drawn tight. A black sedan sat parked across the street, its engine still warm. "That's not her car," Vincent said, noting the license plate. "Tony, run those numbers." While Tony made the call, Vincent studied the building's layout. 2 stories, fire escape on the east side, single entrance in the front. If Elena's attackers were still inside, they'd trapped themselves in a box with only one way out. Perfect. Tony hung up his phone. Registered to Marcus Webb. 3 priors for assault, 2 for breaking and entering. Known associate of the Castellano crew. Vincent's blood went arctic. The Castellanos were a rival family that had been testing boundaries for months. Small provocations, territorial disputes, nothing worth starting a war over. Until now. "They're not random thugs," he said quietly. This was a message. Marco chambered around in his pistol. What kind of message? The kind that gets people buried in shallow graves. Vincent's phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. He opened it and felt his world tilt sideways. "We have your girlfriend. If you want her back breathing, you'll meet us at the warehouse on Dock Street. Come alone. 1 hour." The warehouse on Dock Street belonged to the Castellanos. It was their primary meeting location, a place where business was conducted and problems were solved permanently. They weren't just holding Elena hostage, they were declaring war. "Boss?" Tony asked, noticing the change in Vincent's expression. Vincent showed him the message. Tony's face darkened as he read it. "It's a trap. Of course it's a trap. But they made one crucial mistake." "What's that?" Vincent's smile was colder than winter midnight. "They think I'm coming alone." He looked at his watch. 53 minutes until the deadline. Plenty of time to retrieve Elena from her apartment, ensure she was safe, and then pay a visit to the warehouse that would end the Castellano problem once and for all. But first, they needed to secure the building and assess Elena's condition. Vincent had promised a little girl that her mother would be okay, and Vincent Torino never broke his promises. Danny, take the fire escape. Marco, watch the street. Tony, you're with me through the front door. They moved like shadows through the darkness, each man knowing his role without needing further instruction. This wasn't their first rescue operation. It wouldn't be their last. Vincent approached the front door with measured steps. The wood around the lock was splintered, clear signs of forced entry. Through the gap, he could hear movement upstairs. Voices. Someone was definitely still in the building. He pressed his back against the wall beside the entrance and listened carefully. Two distinct voices. Male, one nervous, one confident. They were arguing about something in hushed tones. Vincent checked his watch again. 48 minutes. Time to end this. Vincent pushed open the damaged door with the barrel of his gun. The hinges creaked like old bones as he stepped into the narrow hallway. The smell hit him immediately. Blood, fear, and something else. Desperation. The voices upstairs had gone quiet. Too quiet. They'd heard him coming. He moved up the stairs with deliberate silence, each step calculated to avoid the creaks he could see in the old wood. Tony followed 3 steps behind, his weapon drawn but pointed down. Both men had done this dance before. Both knew that speed mattered less than precision when lives hung in the balance. The apartment door at the top of the stairs stood wide open. Through the gap, Vincent could see overturned furniture, a broken lamp, picture frames scattered across hardwood floors like fallen leaves. And there, on the living room floor, lay a woman in a torn blue dress. Elena Morrison. She was conscious, but barely. Her left eye was swollen shut. Blood trickled from her nose onto the expensive fabric that was supposed to impress him tonight. But she was breathing. That was what mattered. 2 men stood over her. One held an aluminum baseball bat stained dark at the tip. The other gripped a switchblade that caught the overhead light as his hand shook with adrenaline. They looked up as Vincent appeared in the doorway. For a moment, nobody moved. The apartment existed in a pocket of suspended time where violence hung thick as smoke in the air. The man with the bat spoke first. "Vincent Torino, right on schedule." "Marcus Webb," Vincent replied, recognizing the face from police files Tony had shown him. "I was hoping you'd still be here." Marcus laughed, but it sounded forced, nervous. "You got our message then. Good. Makes this easier." "What makes it easier is that you're both too stupid to run when you had the chance." The man with the knife shifted his weight. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool evening air flowing through the broken window. "We got orders, Torino. Nothing personal." "Orders from who?" "You know who." Vincent did know. This had Sal Castellano's fingerprints all over it. The old man had been pushing boundaries for months, testing Vincent's resolve, seeing how far he could go before the younger boss pushed back. Tonight, he'd gone too far. "Elena," Vincent said softly, not taking his eyes off the 2 men. "Can you hear me?" A weak nod from the floor. She tried to speak but only managed a whisper. "Sophie, she's safe. I promise you, she's safe." Relief flooded Elena's battered features. Even through her pain, even with strangers threatening her life, her first thought was for her daughter. Vincent felt something twist in his chest, something he hadn't experienced in years. "Touching reunion," Marcus said, raising the bat. "But we got business to finish." "Yes," Vincent agreed. "We do." What happened next took less than 3 seconds. Vincent stepped left as Tony stepped right. The man with the knife lunged forward, but Tony's bullet caught him center mass before he'd moved 2 feet. He dropped like a marionette with severed strings. Marcus swung the bat in a wide arc toward Vincent's head. Vincent ducked under it, grabbed Marcus by the throat, and slammed him against the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. The bat clattered to the floor. "Now," Vincent said, his voice deadly calm, "let's talk about those orders." Marcus gasped for air, clawing at Vincent's hand around his windpipe. His face was turning purple. "I can't breathe." Vincent loosened his grip slightly, just enough for Marcus to speak. The warehouse. Sal wants to meet. I know about the warehouse. What I want to know is why he thought threatening an innocent woman would get my attention. He said you were getting soft. Needed to remember. Remember what happens when you let your guard down. Vincent's grip tightened again. Soft? Marcus nodded frantically. Said the old Vincent would never fall for some nobody woman. Said it made you weak. And what do you think, Marcus? Do I seem weak to you right now? Terror flooded Marcus's eyes as he realized his mistake. Vincent Torino wasn't weak. He was something far more dangerous. He was motivated. Please, Marcus wheezed. I got kids. So does she, Vincent said, glancing toward Elena. Did that stop you? The silence stretched between them like a tightening wire. Then Vincent made his decision. Tony, call an ambulance for Elena. Then call Dr. Reeves and tell him I need him at the safe house in 30 minutes. What about him? Tony gestured toward Marcus. Vincent looked at the man whose throat he still held. Marcus was sobbing now, understanding that his fate rested entirely in the hands of someone he'd just made a mortal enemy. He's going to deliver a message for me. Vincent released his grip. Marcus collapsed to his knees, gasping and coughing. Vincent crouched down beside him. Here's what you're going to tell Sal Castellano. You're going to tell him that Vincent Torino accepts his invitation to the warehouse. You're going to tell him that I'll be there in exactly 1 hour. And you're going to tell him that when I arrive, he better have a damn good explanation for why he thought it was acceptable to put his hands on my family. Marcus looked up, confusion mixing with fear on his face. Family? But you ain't even married. Vincent's smile was arctic. I am now. He stood and walked to Elena, kneeling beside her broken form. Her good eye focused on him with effort. Elena, I need you to listen carefully. Paramedics are coming to take you to the hospital. But first my doctor is going to check you over. Make sure nothing's too serious. She tried to sit up, but winced in pain. Sophie, where is Sophie? Safe. She's at Romano's with Maria Benedetto, the woman who runs the restaurant kitchen. She's feeding her soup and probably too much ice cream. A ghost of a smile crossed Elena's lips. She loves ice cream. When you're feeling better, we'll take her for ice cream every day if she wants. Elena's hand found his. Her grip was weak but determined. Vincent, I know who you are. Maria told me stories about your family when she set this up. I know what kind of life you live. Vincent nodded. I won't lie to you about what I am. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you, when you go to that warehouse tonight, promise me you'll come back. The weight of her words hit him harder than any punch he'd ever taken. Someone was worried about him coming home. Someone cared whether he survived the night. It was a feeling he'd forgotten existed. I promise, he said. She squeezed his hand tighter. We need someone who keeps their promises. Then it's a good thing that's exactly what I am. Shatita, the ambulance arrived 12 minutes later, followed closely by Dr. Reeves in his black Mercedes. Vincent watched as Elena was loaded onto a stretcher, her eyes never leaving his face until the doors closed and the vehicle disappeared into the night. Marcus Webb sat handcuffed to a radiator, his message delivered via phone to Sal Castellano's personal number. The response had been immediate and predictable. The warehouse. 1 hour. Come alone or the woman dies. Except Elena wasn't at the warehouse. She was on her way to the best trauma center in the city, surrounded by people Vincent trusted with his life. Sal's leverage had just evaporated like morning mist. Vincent checked his watch. 37 minutes until the meeting. Plenty of time to collect his thoughts and prepare for what would likely be the most important conversation of his criminal career. Boss, Tony said, holstering his weapon. You want us to scout the warehouse first? No, I want you to do something more important. Vincent pulled out his phone and showed Tony a photo. This is Sophie Morrison, 7 years old, currently eating ice cream at Romano's. I want you to take her to the safe house on Elm Street. Make sure she has everything she needs. Toys, books, whatever kids like. You're really doing this, aren't you? Taking on a ready-made family? Vincent considered the question. 6 hours ago, he'd been a bachelor with no attachments beyond his criminal organization. Now he was responsible for a woman in the hospital and her terrified daughter. It should have felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt like purpose. Tony, in our line of work, how many people do you think actually mourn when we die? Tony thought about it. Our crew. Some of the old-timers who remember when your father ran things. Exactly. A handful of criminals and nobody else. But tonight, a little girl ran through dark streets looking for someone to save her mother. And somehow, she found me. Could be coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence. I believe in opportunity. And I believe that sometimes, if you're very lucky, opportunity comes wrapped in a torn blue dress and bare feet. Vincent walked to the window and looked out at the street below. The black sedan that had belonged to Marcus's partner was being loaded onto a tow truck. Bloodstains on Elena's apartment floor were being documented by his cleanup crew. In a few hours, it would look like nothing had ever happened here. But everything had happened here. Everything had changed. His phone buzzed. A text from Maria at the restaurant. "Little one is asking for you. Says she wants to make sure you're really going to help her mama." Vincent typed back quickly. "Tell her I'm going to fix everything. And tell her I'll see her soon." "Boss," Tony said quietly. "What if this is bigger than just Sal making a power play? What if he's got backing from New York? Or Chicago? Then we'll deal with New York and Chicago too. That's a lot of enemies to make over one night." Vincent turned from the window. His expression was calm, but something lethal burned behind his eyes. "Tony, let me ask you something. What's the point of having power if you don't use it to protect the people who matter?" "Fair point. Besides," Vincent added, checking his weapons one final time, "I have a feeling that after tonight, Sal Castellano won't be making any more power plays." The drive to Dock Street took 18 minutes through traffic that seemed to part before Vincent's convoy, like water before the bow of a ship. Word had spread through the underworld's communication networks. Vincent Torino was moving with purpose tonight. Smart people got out of his way. The warehouse district smelled like rust and river water. Abandoned buildings lined both sides of the street like broken teeth in a skull's mouth. This was where the city came to die, where deals were made that never saw daylight, where problems disappeared permanently. Vincent's phone rang as they approached the meeting location. Unknown number. "Torino, you're 3 minutes early." Sal Castellano's gravelly voice came through the speaker. "I like punctuality." "Where is she, Sal?" "Safe. For now. You come in alone like we agreed. She stays safe. You bring your boys with you. And things get complicated." Vincent looked at Tony, who was monitoring radio chatter from other criminal organizations in the area. 3 different families had crews positioned within a 6-block radius. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a show of force. "I'm coming in alone," Vincent said into the phone. "But Sal, if anything happens to Elena Morrison or her daughter, there won't be a hole deep enough for you to hide in." Big words from a man who's about to walk into a building surrounded by my people. "We'll see." Vincent hung up and turned to his crew. "Nobody moves unless I give the signal. If I'm not out in 30 minutes, level the building." "So, boss," Danny said quietly, "you sure about this? Could be walking into an execution." Vincent thought about Sophie's tear-streaked face, about Elena's broken whisper asking him to come back, about the promise he'd made to fix everything. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He stepped out of the SUV and walked toward the warehouse entrance. Behind him, the night held its breath and waited to see what kind of man Vincent Torino really was when everything he'd started to care about hung in the balance. The metal door stood slightly ajar. Light spilled from the crack like blood from a wound. Vincent pushed it open and stepped into whatever waited beyond. The warehouse was exactly what he'd expected. High ceilings, shadows that could hide an army, the smell of motor oil and old violence. And in the center of the space, under a single hanging light bulb, sat Sal Castellano at a folding table. He was alone, or appeared to be alone. "Vincent," Sal said, not standing. "Thanks for coming." "Where is she?" "Straight to business." "I respect that." Sal gestured to an empty chair across from him. "Sit. Let's talk about the future." Vincent remained standing. I asked you a question, and I'll answer it. After we have our conversation. The silence stretched between them like a tightrope. Vincent could feel eyes watching him from the shadows. How many guns were trained on him right now? How many men were waiting for Sal's signal? It didn't matter. He'd walked into worse situations and walked out alive. Tonight would be no different. You made a mistake, Sal, Vincent said finally. Did I? From where I'm sitting, it looks like I got your attention pretty effectively. You got my attention, but you also declared war on my family, and that's a mistake you don't get to walk away from. Sal laughed, but it sounded hollow in the empty space. Family? You mean the woman you've known for 6 hours? I mean the woman who trusted me to protect her daughter. The little girl who ran through dark streets looking for help and somehow found me. That's my family now, Sal, and you hurt them. I barely touched them. A little scare tactic to get you here. Elena Morrison is in the hospital with a concussion and 3 broken ribs. Her daughter is traumatized. You call that barely touching them? For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Sal's face. The hospital. Did you think I'd leave her bleeding on her apartment floor while I came to play games with you? Vincent pulled out his phone and showed Sal a photo that Dr. Reeves had sent 20 minutes earlier. Elena in a hospital bed, conscious and stable, but clearly injured. He pushed the barrel of his gun against Vincent's forehead, but Vincent didn't flinch. The warehouse erupted into chaos as Tony's voice crackled through hidden speakers. Boss, we've got movement on all sides. Danny's in position. Marco has the high ground. Vincent smiled coldly. I told you I was coming alone, Sal. I never said my boys weren't already here. The gunfire lasted exactly 47 seconds. When the smoke cleared, Sal Castellano lay bleeding on the concrete floor. His empire crumbling around him like everything he'd built was made of sand. Vincent walked out of that warehouse a different man than the one who'd entered. Not because of the violence. He'd seen plenty of that. But because waiting for him outside was Tony, holding the hand of a little girl in a clean dress who'd been brave enough to save her mother's life. Sophie, Vincent said, kneeling down to her level. How's your mama? She's awake. She asked me to give you this. Sophie handed him a folded piece of paper with shaky handwriting. Thank you for keeping your promise. 6 months later, Vincent Torino married Elena Morrison in a small ceremony at Romano's restaurant. Sophie walked her mother down the aisle, wearing the biggest smile anyone had ever seen. Sometimes the best things in life happen when your plans fall apart completely. When blind dates turn into rescue missions. When strangers become family. When a little girl's courage changes everything. That night, Vincent learned something more valuable than all the power he'd accumulated in 37 years. He learned that real strength isn't about making people fear you. It's about making sure the people you love never have to be afraid. And that's a lesson worth remembering. No matter what kind of life you're living, sometimes the most important appointments are the ones you never plan to keep.